When most people die, they plan for a traditional funeral and burial. But for some, death is an opportunity to make a last memorable statement about their life. On this special episode of The Will, we'll take a look at those thinking outside the box, so to speak, by pushing the limits and making some very outrageous final wishes.
The funeral business and the way people are asked to dispose of their final remains is evolving like everything else with technology and interminglings of culture. Sometimes we see things that we're not used to seeing.
A lot of wills are trying to be as green as possible. Dust to dust, return as you are. Who are we to say how you return?
I suppose you can have your remains disposed of any way that you want as long as it's legal. Obviously, if you want yourself set on fire and burnt in the public square there, they're not going to do that. There's obviously limits to what's going to happen with your body.
Personalization of a funeral is only going to get stronger and stronger. If something's important to you in life, it should be important to you in death.
While some like to get a jump start planning their burials, others actually use funeral implements to help the living. A South Korean nursing professional promotes a new technique of lying in a coffin for stress relief. The method of contemplating one's life in a dark, closed casket is said to help people reassess their life priorities and might just give someone that extra incentive they need to quit smoking. While some use coffins as a self-help tool, others prefer to use them as the perfect spot to recline after a long day by adding a couple of legs and luxurious touches like velvet or a hot animal print. Some choose to have funerals while they're still alive, so they can get one last dress rehearsal and hear exactly what everyone is going to say about them. Others throw their funeral home a curveball by ordering traditional caskets with bizarre modifications, like a casket designed for people who prefer to be buried sitting up.
Today, the funeral industry is being asked to do a little bit of everything from liquefying the body to freezing the body to the traditional burial, entombment, and cremation. Our industry will change and will provide to what they need. It's endless what's going to be required for us to provide for people's wishes.
Some choose extreme methods to record their wills and will stop at nothing to make sure that their final wishes are understood. In a bizarre attempt at getting their final message across, some will even resort to playing games with their loved ones by leaving a puzzle that will take years to decipher. Fernando Bay's original will was a proper one, prepared by a notary. However, while she was suffering from cancer, Obey kept herself busy with her favorite pastime, Sudoku, a popular number game with the objective of filling a grid with the digits 1 to 9.
What she did, she wrote in the puzzle, without anyone knowing, her final will and testament.
Scribbled here and there amongst the numbered grids of the popular game was a discernible will redistributing her assets. No signature, but all in her handwriting, and the magazine sealed in an envelope, which she carefully stored.
This will is definitely begging for trouble. First of all, there were no witnesses, which makes it difficult to establish the circumstances in which it was prepared.
Years of court battles and paperwork followed, as her kids fought over the validity of the will.
The Sudoku will was contested by her son, who benefited from the original notarized will. He believed his mother was too heavily medicated and not of sound mind as she scribbled letters in the Sudoku puzzle.
In 2009, the Quebec Superior Court held the Sudoku will as valid, and the assets were distributed according to the Sudoku terms. The son was outraged and appealed the ruling. The next judge dismissed the previous ruling outright, stating that the will clearly did not meet the requirements of being legitimate. The son won his appeal. The Sudoku will was no longer considered valid, and the assets were redistributed according to the original will.
You know, the notion that this Sudoku will was even considered to be legitimate is mind-blowing. The fact that the family spent 2 years trying to decipher this puzzle is a great testament to having the importance of a clear will that's properly signed, witnessed, and notarized.
I think if I would give any legal advice coming out of this particular will, I would tell people to perhaps use the crossword puzzle next time.
Some write their final wishes in ways that fly in the face of convention and choose the most outlandish methods to record their will. On June 8, 1948, in Saskatchewan, Canada, a farmer named Cecil George Harris became trapped under his own tractor. Fearing that he was near death, he carved his will into the tractor's fender. It read, "In case I die in this mess, I leave all to the wife, Cecil George Harris."
Love the tractor bumper will. I'm a big fan. That actually would hold up, because that's a dying declaration in many ways.
The fender will was one of a kind. It was probated and stood as his will. The fender is currently on display at the University of Saskatchewan College of Law Library.
Even if it's not witnessed, when someone is dying, a court will give great leeway because he did write his name, and he wrote his wife's name, and it was in his handwriting.
It's just like you and I, if we're coming up with some sort of an agreement or a contract and we write it out on a napkin and we sign it, that's legally binding.
Therefore, the court did give leeway to it because his body was stuck underneath the fender. So he could have been possibly the only one to have written it.
You would like to have a witness, but obviously you would hope that the guy would help you get out from under the tractor than worry about witnessing the signature.
Some choose their body as a canvas to express a final wish that is certain not to be overlooked. "80-year-old Mary Wolford wants to make sure there are no misunderstandings when it comes to her living will."
Why I went with a permanent tattoo on my body? Well, I don't know. I think it all started when I was working in the hospital. We would have codes. Then we would run to the room and try to revive this patient. Sometimes we would say, go slowly rather than rush, because we knew, you know, the inevitable. Then I think just as a joke, I had a little pin made, DNR, do not resuscitate. Of course, that can mean Department of Natural Resources, so that doesn't mean anything. And then I thought, I think you need something more permanent.
When Mary first called me about the do not resuscitate tattoo on her sternum, I was kind of hesitant. She was so cute and feisty. I really liked her personality, and I really wanted to help her out, but I just needed a little time to sit on this and think on it. And I wasn't sure if it was up to me by putting this tattoo on her, if I was a variable in her not being brought back to life or not. She was a very persistent lady. She called me probably like 3 times before I finally did the tattoo.
Gary didn't want to give me the tattoo originally. And I said, now listen, you get drunks and druggies in here and you tattoo anything on them. Do I look like I'm lucid? So do it. After he did it, I said, if I bring a busload of little old ladies over here for tattoos, I get 10%.
I think an 80-year-old woman getting a tattoo anywhere on her body is pretty gutsy.
She's got a set, let me tell you, honestly, just to put them right on her. She could have put on, you know, a daisy, a daffodil, some tribal art. But no, she wanted do not resuscitate.
I'm curious of what the font was and what the size, because resuscitate's a long word.
Well, right there, whatever style, it was no big decision.
We wanted it to be simple writing, easy to comprehend what it's saying. Do not resuscitate.
We had to make sure we had resuscitate spelt right. They looked it up because, do you know how to spell it? There you go. This is the image, Do Not Resuscitate, which I have permanently tattooed on my chest because that is the first place they look and try to revive you. I believe in Do Not Resuscitate if I cannot be brought back to my maximum health before this seizure, stroke, or whatever. I want normal death with dignity.
The question is, would this ever hold up in court?
Nope. Zero. Wouldn't work at all. Not even a chance.
It's not her handwriting. She had it done in Illinois. She lives in Iowa. That's not dated. Are the doctors supposed to look for other tattoos on her body to see if she's amended?
So guess what she's gonna have to do? She's gonna have to go and sign it herself in the reverse in front of a mirror, so it is her signature, dated with witnesses. Or do it the easy way and actually just type it up and have it done, and that takes 15 minutes, half an hour, and eliminate any confusion.
Mary's tattoo ignited a news frenzy and got everyone talking about the legitimacy of a tattoo as a living will. Her daughter, who happens to be a professor in medical school, found herself in the middle of the debate.
We were talking about end-of-life choices, and one of these medical students said out of the blue, "Did you read about that crazy old lady who got the Do Not Resuscitate tattoo?" One of the students said, "Well, you know, it's not legal and binding, so we wouldn't act upon it." And I said, "Listen, folks, she has a living will taped to her refrigerator." And then the conversation stopped, and one of them said, "How would you know what this old lady has taped to her refrigerator?" And I said, "She's my mom."
Next, preserving contact with the departed inspires these two unusual final wishes.
The women in my life mean a lot to me. I wanted to be able to keep a piece of them. I mean, what better way than to, put them in a diamond?
Some will go to great lengths and attempt the greatest stunt of all, trying to cheat death and come back from the dead for a loved one. Harry Houdini, world-famous magician and escapologist, was known for his death-defying stunts. His tricks often involved escaping while tied upside down in the most precarious situations, including from various crates that were nailed shut and thrown into the water. Some speculate that as a result of his dangerous stunts, he became obsessed with the details of how he was going to die and whether there was life after death.
Houdini became obsessed with spirits after his mother died. He was very close to his mother, and he was devastated when he lost her. He desperately wanted to contact her from beyond the grave, and he in fact attended many seances hoping that he might be able to summon her.
Houdini was never able to legitimately summon his mother in these seances, and came to the conclusion that most of these were fraudulent.
He decided that he would try once and for all to find out if there was life after death by giving his wife detailed instructions on how to contact him after he died.
In his instructions to his wife, Houdini said, "I will say the words, Rosabelle, believe. And if you hear those words, then and only then you will know that it's me communicating with you from after death." For 10 years, his poor wife held seance after seance. She never heard the magic words.
In 1936, after one more unsuccessful seance, she put out a candle that had kept burning beside a photograph of Houdini since his death. She said that 10 years was long enough to wait for any man.
However, the ritual of trying to contact Houdini from beyond the grave never died. Magicians throughout the world to this day continue the tradition of holding a seance on Halloween every year for Houdini.
But as of this year, Harry has never called back.
Some choose to keep their loved ones close, as they are simply too alluring to be kept hidden away in a wooden box for all eternity. Creating laboratory diamonds is a revolutionary process created in the 60s, whereby carbon was transformed into a diamond. Washington, D.C. native Don Stein takes the old adage, "Diamonds are forever," to a whole other level.
The women in my life mean a lot to me. Instead of just sitting up on the shelf, I wanted to be able to keep a piece of them with me. I mean, what better way than to, put them in a diamond, one of the most precious things in the world. I did a little bit of research and found DNA to diamonds.
DNA to Diamonds uses cutting-edge technology to create personal diamonds using carbon sources from you, your deceased loved ones, or even your beloved pet. After Dawn's grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, Dawn knew that this was exactly what she wanted to preserve her grandmother's remains.
I went and talked to my grandmother about it, and of course her first reaction was like, why? Why do you want to do this? And so after we sat down and talked about it, the only stipulation she had for me was she couldn't be blue.
I love this idea. I think it's a great idea. If you can make diamonds out of human remains, why not?
If it wasn't against my religion with cremation, honestly, I would look to make myself into a diamond, because that gives a whole new meaning to that person's a gem. Because you really are.
I think the funeral industry has come a long way if they have managed to create diamonds out of human remains.
Not more than probably 25% of the population even have the slightest inkling that something like this can be done. Diamonds being created in a laboratory, that's been taking place for over 50 years. Laboratory-created diamonds were used for industrial purposes all of this time. It's only been a little over a decade that technology has brought it to the point where gemstone quality laboratory or man-made diamonds could be made.
DNA to Diamonds uses carbon sources from people instead of a generic source. Two sources can be used: cremains or hair. Through a high heat process, these are turned into pure carbon. The carbon is then placed with the diamond seed in the core of a massive incubator that replicates the extreme conditions that occur naturally deep in the earth. In the end, a real 2-carat rough diamond is produced. Experts can now barely distinguish the lab-created diamonds from the real thing.
Many have told us that what we have done is created a new category under that world of diamonds. But we don't like to think that we are in the diamond business. We are in the remembrance business.
In 2001, when Dawn's grandmother Helen died of cancer, Dawn began to carry out her plan to turn her beloved grandma's remains into a diamond. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only bad news in store for Dawn.
3 months later, my great-grandmother died. And then 4 years later, my mom died suddenly. I had her cremated, and then I brought her ashes. After that, my daughter and I went out and got our hair cut.
And that's when Dawn decided to turn her diamond into a project spanning generations. She was going to put all the women in her family into one ring.
My reaction was, wow, I don't see that being something that many of us can do.
So it's my great-grandmother's hair, my grandmother's ashes, my mom's ashes, and then my hair and my daughter's hair. It is a half-carat princess-cut diamond. The appraised price is over $10,000.
I don't think that's that expensive. Family gems are priceless. I don't have a problem with the price.
That diamond is multi-generational, and it's a historic piece within the family. Literally handed down from generation to generation. Handed.
If it's worth this much money, someone in your family just might be tempted to pawn it off and sell grandma at the store.
My greatest fear is losing the diamond. It's one of those things I never really knew what priceless meant until I actually got it.
No one other than Dawn Stein has, as of yet, tried to get that many people into one ring. who says you have to stop at 5 generations?
I knew our 5 generation was just something nobody had ever done before, so to do a 6 would just be amazing. We'd probably have to stop at my great-great-grandmother, but from there on down, you know, could be an endless possibility.
Next, people are thinking up all sorts of new ways to dispose of the human body and have discovered no shortage of possibilities.
What Mother Nature takes months or years to accomplish, we're accomplishing in a matter of hours.
Some wills have outrageous surprises for their loved ones. You never know what could end up on your doorstep. In the early 1900s, an American doctor by the name of Wagner, whose relatives had ignored him in life, decided to get revenge in death.
His will actually stipulated that he wanted one brother to get his left arm and left hand, and the other brother to get the other arm and other hand, and then his other body parts to other family members: ears, nose, legs. Lucky people.
He left a good sum of money to pay for the dismemberment of his body, and none to his family. Carrying out this grisly request would come with a certain set of challenges.
Anytime you're going to want to get dismembered, you have to think this through. Who do you think is going to be the person that's going to dismember this body and send these parts through the mail? It's just not going to happen. It's insane. It's somebody that's crazy. They're out of their mind.
Even if he managed to cut up his body, I can't see who would deliver it. I'm not sure the Postal Service would have been too thrilled about that. I mean, how thrilled would you be if you got a FedEx package one day, you know, with the big caption in front, danger, caution, human remains inside.
I'm not quite sure why he wants one brother to get one arm and the other to get the other arm or the nose. If he was just trying to shock them or make them angry, I think that would do the job. He must have really hated his family.
The details of when or how this unsightly task was carried out was never uncovered. This service has yet to be offered as part of any estate planning package.
This is not a message that's sent that's saying, hey, I have you and I'm holding so-and-so for a ransom and you said my thumb or something. No, that's not this situation. Person's already dead and they were just getting back at people. Court would not probate that and that one would be out and they just inherit what he had.
While some prefer a more traditional departure, others request groundbreaking technologies to dispose of their body. Humans have always either buried or burned their dead. Now, some are attempting to bring a game-changing technology in an industry that doesn't like change. This option was what Harold Schimp's family was looking for.
My dad did not want to be buried. You know, he didn't want to be put in a box, and that's not what he wanted. We talked to the social worker through hospice, and he explained all our options, you know, burial, cremation, that type of thing. And then he told us about this process called alkaline hydrolysis. He said it was essentially a green process, which is something that my wife and we care about.
We've been composting and recycling for years. His dad was part of that whole process with us at home. It just seemed natural. It just seemed like a good fit.
The process is called alkaline hydrolysis. The body is placed in a stainless steel cylinder. The high-temperature technique uses a mixture of water, lye, 60 pounds of pressure per square inch at up to 305 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes 5 to 8 hours to dissolve the body. The end result is a green-brown tinted liquid that has the consistency of coffee and also includes soft, nutrient-rich bone remains. The liquid is disposed of either through the sanitary sewer system or can be used in a garden or green space.
As far as what happens to a body during the alkaline hydrolysis process, it's an accelerated version of natural decomposition. What Mother Nature takes months or years to accomplish, we're accomplishing in a matter of hours. It's a very natural process, aided by, heat and
a higher pH.
There's something about this particular idea that tends to give people the EBGBs. To think of your body reduced to a cup of green fluid, you know, I mean, but I think it really is the future in many ways, because the quicker, the easiest, and the most environmentally friendly way you can dispose of your body is going to be foremost on the minds of many people.
Not everyone is enthusiastic about the new method. The state of Ohio has gone so far as to issue a statement claiming that the process would be put on hold until further review, because they believe there are insufficient regulations in place at this point.
I found out we were some of the last ones to use the service because I read it in the newspaper.
It took us a little aback because we knew there were some issues, but we didn't really know the depth that we don't know much about all that.
The fact that the state of Ohio stopped issuing permits kind of caught me by surprise. There's no law in Ohio that specifically allows alkaline hydrolysis as a method of disposition. The law is not written such that for you to do anything, it must first be specifically allowed.
I really don't have an issue with it. I don't see why it's so much different than cremation. I don't see why it's different than burial. It's just another way to dispose the body.
The guy who's making the laws in the legislature is no different than your grandmother. He or she is thinking liquefaction of human remains, and they go, ew, you know, that can't be good because it's gross. Well, the same could be said of brain surgery or hot dogs.
Jeff Edwards believes there are other motivations for taking away his permit.
I think the unofficial reason is a combination of two things, either the unknown or professional jealousy. The Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors is made up of funeral directors appointed by the governor. The question a couple of board members had asked me, and as well as local funeral directors had asked me, what happens if I get a family that wants alkaline hydrolysis? I have no choice but to send them to you. After the letter was issued to the Department of Health that said, we don't consider this to be an authorized method of disposition, one of the board members, a funeral home owner, made inquiry to one of the 4 manufacturers of the equipment to look into buying the equipment for themselves.
Regardless of Ohio's reasons for refusing alkaline hydrolysis at this time, other states have started legalizing the method. Alkaline hydrolysis is on track to becoming an alternative to cremation in California and has been legalized in Florida, and companies are poised to soon start offering the service. Some satisfied customers are still waiting for the state of Ohio to change its mind.
I would choose the process myself. Try to minimize the stuff that we're putting back into the environment, because I think it's just an important thing to do.
I've already told my husband that when we do our wills, which we need to do, that I want that in there, that a process like this is exactly what would be right for me.
Next, some wills bequeath pets extraordinary items, giving them a new lease on life after their owners pass.
That's when I found out that used Pacemaker cannot go to another human being.
It went to a dog.
Many do not draw any distinctions between the bipedal and 4-legged friends in their wills. As a result, some animals are set up for only the very best. Animal lover Jonathan Jackson was very specific about how to care for his pets. In his will, he wrote, "It is man's duty as lord of animals to watch over and protect the lesser and feebler." For his part, he left his fortune to be used in the creation of a house for cats, where cats would have bedrooms, a gym, a dining hall where they would only be served specially prepared gourmet food.
To leave your money to build a cat house with all the good things cats need, roofs to climb on, furniture to lay on, sun to soak in, I think it's great. But see, I like cats, it's easy for me to say.
There is no law against frittering away your money on elaborate cat houses. All I'm saying is that with poverty throughout the world, what idiot would spend that kind of money on cats?
It does seem a bit foolish to spend all your money on a cat house, but you're dead. So your money doesn't do you any good. At least his money is not being wasted just on the cats. I mean, they gotta buy the cat food, the kitty litter. It is going to employ people, so in that sense, it's not a bad idea.
Jackson's will does leave the door open to other interpretations.
That gives another definition for a cat house, doesn't it? You know what the name of a cat house is. If someone misread that wrong because that's slang for something different, then someone totally probated that will wrong. And there are a lot of women out of money at the time, and they could have had a nice house.
It would be wise for animals to keep a close watch on some funerals because they can be the first in line to inherit astounding items. Dorothea Edwards was a sensible woman and insisted that all her parts, real or mechanical, were to be put to good use long after she was gone.
My mom was a force to be reckoned with. She grew up through the Depression, was a World War II veteran, was an assistant professor at the University of Georgia. She never had an obstacle that she couldn't conquer. When she asked that I honor this request, should something happen to her, to donate her pacemaker, I was determined to see it through.
Despite the unusual nature of the request, Mala expected nothing less from her mother.
My mom recycled everything. We washed aluminum foil and folded it and put it away, and she may never have gotten around to using it again. But, it's that mentality for those that lived through the Depression.
In 2002, Dorothea was fitted with a new pacemaker for her heart arrhythmia.
She'd just gotten this brand new pacemaker, and it was a top-of-the-line Cadillac version. She said, Mela, I'm going to hold you accountable that this goes to someone in need. And if it could be used again, this was something she wanted to do.
Unfortunately, the moment came suddenly and only 3 weeks after the surgery. At the age of 80, Dorothea Edwards passed away. Mala was left with her mother's request of donating her pacemaker, which she would soon discover presented a great obstacle.
The cardiologist came in, and that's when I found out that, unfortunately, in this country, used pacemaker cannot go to another human being.
Because it was in someone else's body, the mechanism may not be a candidate for implantation because it may carry still bacterium that they can't get rid of.
I think it's a shame. I mean, it's an expensive object to put in the body, and it's very useful, and not everyone can afford it. If the medical industry could find a way to refab them, get them ready to use again, I think it'd be great. Not everyone can afford what needs to be done, and they are so very helpful to people that get them.
Even though she could not donate the pacemaker to a person, Dorothea Edwards' daughter was determined to find a way to honor her mother's final request.
She couldn't donate it to anybody else, so it went to a dog.
A woman's dying request has given this canine a second chance at life.
This was not just any dog. Sunshine's former owner was a drug dealer on the FBI's most wanted list. After a major police bust, Sunshine was taken in by the neighbors.
This dog had been in their backyard for several months. We asked him, what are you going to do with the dog? He said, well, it'll go to the pound. And we said, well, we'd like the dog. I said, okay. They made us sign a piece of paper that said the dog might be evidence.
It took me 30 minutes to coax Sunshine into my house because she'd never been inside before, and always in the backyard. It was just wonderful having her there because I had already bonded with her. I'd sneak over at night and feed her treats and get my dog fix. She bonded with me, and she was my dog from then on.
And at that time, there was no real indication of anything. And up until she had her heart issues, she had minor afflictions, skin issues now and then, things like that. But her big event was that Thanksgiving when I was out of town and my wife was walking Sunshine and she fell over.
We had taken her out and she fainted or passed out or seized We weren't sure at the time when it was. She'd always been a little off, which now I attribute to the fact that she was probably having heart problems even then.
In the first surgery that was performed by the vets at the University of Georgia, they used a donated pacemaker whose shelf life had expired but was otherwise in still excellent shape. The pacemaker lasted a while, but soon new problems started surfacing.
After about 2.5 years, Sunshine again started having these fainting spells and not eating and acting kind of strange, so we followed through with it, and one of the things Medtronics did was check to see how the pacemaker was performing. And they determined that the battery had started failing in the original pacemaker.
Another surgery was urgently required, but at that point, Medtronics was no longer giving away expired pacemakers, so they had to find another way to save Sunshine's life.
Then we got the news that Dorothy Edwards was donating her pacemaker and that Sunshine would get it. And I went into crying fits again. I cried. I was so happy and just so relieved that this dog who had such a good heart and everybody loved, and I'm going to cry now, was going to get another chance.
It was going to take a miracle or a lot of money to save this dog. 80-year-old Dorothea Edwards supplied the miracle.
I have a dear friend who called me just to say, Mayla, you're not going to believe this, but your mother's name is all over the news down here. That's when I found out that the University of Georgia's vet school had issued a press release about the fact that my mom's pacemaker had been given to Sunshine.
It made people aware of a valuable service at that time for particularly people who couldn't afford the pacemakers if they had to pay for them.
I feel Dorothy Edwards was a saint. She gave me a little bit longer with my dog.
With each new pacemaker in surgery, the cost of keeping Sunshine alive kept growing.
We don't have an exact breakdown of what we spent on each phase of Sunshine surgery, but we do know that over the life of the dog, we spent over $16,000. I think you have to be a dog owner to understand that.
Sunshine's struggles have helped bring the debate of donating pacemakers to the forefront.
We already donate body parts, and they're like not new, you know, so if there's any caveat emptor, buyer beware issues, I think they apply equally to used body parts as they would to a piece of technology like a pacemaker.
It's definitely an odd thing, but I suppose, you know, if it helped a little doggy someplace, all is well.
I think it's a very important thing. There's a lot of people who can't afford the original equipment cost of buying a pacemaker new off the shelf. If it can give somebody else some more years with their pet and that rewarding relationship that you get and the specialness of your pet, it's not often you get to tell people, my dog has a pacemaker.
Next, others spend hours on the details of their casket and turn pre-planning into a part-time hobby.
It's just typical of his style. And then when he told us he was also going to make a cooler out of it, loved it.
There's really no accounting for taste when it comes to coffin modifications, and all kinds of bizarre touches are requested to create a one-of-a-kind casket. Bill Bramante wants to be eternally close to his favorite beverage. After suffering a series of health problems, he knew it was time to design his dream resting place.
Every couple of years I would have an episode. Everyday heart attack, I guess. So it was in, I think, 2004, I had one of those episodes. And it was a little worse than the previous, I think it was the fourth or fifth one. My wife's an invalid, and both my daughters in California. So I called them up and I said, you know what, the next one might be the last one. Why don't you come out, see your old man, and let's get the funeral all squared away. So they came out, and we were gonna go coffin shopping.
We're here at Pinozzo Brothers Funeral Home to get my dad a casket.
So as we're looking at all of these things, there was nothing that really grabbed my attention. You don't have it. You don't have what I'm looking for. I kind of wandered off into the cheap section where they had these plain metal coffins, and I saw this silver one. God, that looks like a Pabst Blue Ribbon can. And I asked Phil if he could, you know, make it look like a Pabst can.
Oh, I was totally shocked by the request. Then if you know Bill and you know how his nature and how he is, I knew that it was, you know, something that he was, you know, really serious about.
Phil asked his friend Brian Lean from the Scott Sign Company to help with the design. He used a unique lamination process to create a one-of-a-kind wet beer look for the casket.
I had a lot of fun. It's totally not in keeping with what I do day to day and week to week. When Bill would call and say, hey, what's going on? Where's this casket? I really want it. Then you would jump back into that mode of thinking, wow, this is crazy, but let's get it done, because I'm as much excited to see it done as everybody else.
When it was finally finished, people couldn't wait to see the final result.
I loved it. I thought it was typical of him.
He's unique, and it really didn't catch me by surprise. I'm sure it didn't catch you by surprise either. It's just typical of his style.
And then when he told us he was also going to make a cooler out of it, loved it.
Definitely.
Loved it.
Life for 67-year-old Bill Bramante has often revolved around his favorite beer, Pabst Blue Ribbon. And it appears even death now won't be able to change that.
We're figuring it's going to hold 15 cases of Pabst and 150 pounds of ice.
I love beer, so I love the concept. I'd like to borrow it maybe sometime for a tailgate party.
While he's alive, he gets to enjoy the doggone thing, and then when he becomes room temperature, he's already got his container.
He enjoyed his casket. Who even thinks about to do that? And threw a party.
His casket parties are renowned in Chicago Heights, and everyone comes out to get a cold beer from his incredible custom-made cooler.
It was a typical party. I put in the email, I don't know how much beer it'll hold. I'm figuring it's going to hold 15 cases. That with 150 pounds of ice should weigh about what I weigh, and I says all the prospective pallbearers can carry it around the barn to practice. Other than a few people thinking that it was morbid, everybody, I believe, saw it as being in character.
I grew up in the funeral business, so I always had a more, I think, conservative concept of what a casket was used for. Probably a little more reverent feel toward a casket, although a lot of people, including Bill, would feel that there is a lot of reverence to a beer cooler. So.
Oh, I loved it. As soon as I walked into the barn and I saw it, it was, that is not going into the ground. He loves Pabst. It makes sense. A lot of people get those paper mache, their favorite scotch. Dad just one-upped it, raised the bar, and just had his whole casket done in what it is he likes.
Some opt for a frosty casket in hopes that one day they can be brought back to life. Dick Clare was a TV co-creator and writer of sitcoms such as The Facts of Life and The Carol Burnett Show. He was only 57 when he died of an AIDS-related illness in 1989. He was determined not to let the Grim Reaper have the last laugh and decided to be frozen in order to get the chance to live again.
Life need not be limited, Dick thought, to the usual 80 years or so that many of us spend upon the earth, but rather maybe 1,000 years, maybe 2,000, maybe forever. So Dick embraced the possibility of immortality, physical immortality through cryonics.
Cryonics uses low temperatures to preserve humans and animals who can no longer be sustained by contemporary medicine. Immediately after death, a cryoprotective agent composed of liquid nitrogen is injected to replace body fluids. Next, the frozen body is immersed in a storage vessel filled with liquid nitrogen, with the hope that one day it will be thawed.
I don't think any of us want to die. There's always something else out there that you want to do.
I feel that when my time comes, then my time comes. I'm okay with that. Other people may not be, hence being cryogenically frozen. And if that's something that they believe in and they want to be an ice pop, go ahead.
Call me old fogey if you will, but I find it rather pretentious that people can choose to have their remains frozen based on their ability to pay.
It doesn't make sense to me, but I suppose it made sense to them. Who'd want to live forever anyway?
Well, apparently some go to great lengths for the mere possibility.
Dick Clare was passionately committed to cryonics and was a true believer in the notion that medical science will progress, and that if you were suffering from a disease, as he was, if you could find a way to suspend yourself, you then could be retrieved at a time when medical science could cure you. What he wanted to do was support the development of cryogenics to the point that he had left his entire estate, which was sizable, to Alcor.
Alcor is the largest of only a handful of companies around the world that offers to deep freeze your body in liquid nitrogen until modern medicine catches up. By naming Alcor as the beneficiary of his large estate, Dick Clare was expecting to receive the highest level of cryonics care available at the time. But negative views of the cutting-edge technology put his final wishes on hold. After his death, the hospital refused to release the body to Alcor.
Well, the things that we had to do in order to get the right to have his body frozen was a two-step process. We had to first get the body released to Alcor. The second thing we had to do was to get a death certificate issued, because it's not lawful to dispose of a body without a death certificate. And the state had said, we'll only issue a death certificate if you are either buried in a cemetery, or you're cremated, or disposed at sea. And if what you wanted to be done with your own body didn't fit in one of those slots, you would not have a death certificate. We went to court, and Judge Munoz said, well, why won't you release the body if this is what the man clearly wanted? And the hospital said, we can't because he doesn't have a death certificate. And Judge Munoz said, but the man is dead. It just went round and round in circles. And we got nowhere until finally Judge Munoz said enough, and that he was going to rule that the body could be released according to what Dick Clare had said he wanted.
The battle, however, was still not over. Alcor found out that Clare changed his will shortly before he died, leaving half of his estate to his family instead of the entire sum to Alcor. This incited them to contest the will, and they claimed that the family had wrongly manipulated Dick Clare on his deathbed to alter his will.
If we had had any other case, this would be a cakewalk. But because this was an organization that people regarded as kooky versus a family, the balance shifted, and so did the result.
The family won the right to half of Clare's estate. Nevertheless, Dick Clare's wish to be cryonically frozen was still honored, as the other half of the estate ensured his body would be kept in a solid state indefinitely.
Well, the Alcor case, it's a terrific example of you may have lost the battle but won the war. We now have a published opinion by the Court of Appeals from California establishing the right of you or me or anyone to determine how your body is disposed of when you pass on, including the right for it to be frozen if that's what you want.
Winning the right to have his body frozen was a major victory for Clare. He believed this would give him a second chance at life in a strange new future world, normally only found in the pages of a sci-fi novel.
Both Dick and I would agree that currently immortality is impossible and may never be possible. Dick may always simply be a frozen guy. But on the other hand, maybe not. Maybe technology will develop to where Dick can be reanimated and live in another 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years. It's a gamble. Dick was a gambler and took that chance.
People have always had passionate views on how they wish to make their last exit. Some are eco-visionaries that want to transform the industry. However, the law and government often lag behind.
Eventually, we will run out of space to bury the people in the world. So you're going to have to figure something out.
For others, it's simply one last opportunity for a display of wealth.
Some people, they got a lot of money, and what they want to do, they want to rule from the grave. For them, if they've got whatever it took, they don't even think about it.
Emerging technologies and cultural influences are changing the landscape of what's possible.
Funeral industry is going to have to be fast on their feet to meet the unusual new demands of their clients, which seem to be getting more and more out there every year.
I don't think the industry will ever become obsolete, but we're going to have to continue to stretch so we can continue to provide for people's outrageous wishes.